Welcome to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. I'm your host, LaMont Leavitt. In a world overflowing with noise, confusion, and distraction, we're here to cut through the clutter and explore bold, unique paths to a longer, healthier, and more vibrant life. Through candid conversations with business leaders, wellness experts, industry pioneers, and innovators, we'll uncover insights to help you discover your own personalized, unique approach to thriving. Tune in, trust the compass of wisdom within, and find your fountain of vitality. Hello, this is LaMont Leavitt from Fountain of Vitality podcast, and we are excited to have with us today the president of Rapid Credentialing, Brandy Brimhall. Brandy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
We've had so many different challenges in life, and one of the areas you've immersed yourself in for quite a while now is a whole battle of reimbursement with billing and coding and all those challenges. Tell me how you do that from your perspective, how you see things from the insurance company's perspective, as well as different tools you use to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go back actually to the very beginning. This is my 26th year in healthcare, and it has been a passion obsession of mine. So I tell people all the time, I really have had almost nothing but fun for the past 26 years and counting. And just like we were talking about a few minutes ago before we went live, your dad was in the very early part of that. I met him back 26 years ago, and really just stayed the path on that. So to quickly introduce myself, it's been 26 years with the administrative and the coding, billing, collections, and really everything to do with the revenue cycle system in healthcare. And to arrive to where I have today, I not only have worked with clinics and in clinics and with schools and state associations for many years, but I'm dual certified in coding, dual certified in compliance, certified in auditing, and certified in credentialing. And so from that, I go all over the country on webinars and podcasts and other places like this to talk to clinics, but also in person to live events all the time. And I work with them through my credentialing service. Now, to touch a little bit on your question related to the common challenges clinics have in healthcare, while I would say that it really is from one extreme to the other or one end of the spectrum to the other, as healthcare providers, we look at our patients and we evaluate them to look for interferences in their nervous system, their musculoskeletal system, in their health in general, and then we address that as healthcare providers, regardless of our specialty, to determine what's the best path, what interferences, I should say, is this patient having in their health, and what's the best path forward to either minimize or remove those interferences. And so to translate that into coding and collections, I look at the revenue cycle system for the clinics and I look for the interferences from one end of the revenue cycle system to the other, help to identify those interferences, and then determine the path forward for that healthcare facility or that clinic to minimize or remove those interferences. And by interferences, it could be claims rejections, claims denials, records requests, recoupments, interference and disruption in patient relationships, reduced collections, increasing aging accounts receivable, and everything from one end to the other related to that. So I do have a series of tools and strategies that I use and work with clinics every single day to address all of those things and ultimately help to streamline their revenue cycle system, increase collections, increase confidence, and ensure patient relationships are stable, because patient relationships are either directly or indirectly impacted by what's taking place in the billing collections in our facilities.
Oh, great. Well, tell me what you found works for you from a well, before that, let's go back to what are the problems that you see that keep happening over and over again that need to be figured out or minimized, those friction points that kind of hold back a clinic or a doctor's office from moving forward.
Yeah, so the friction points kind of a long and distinguished list because it can be, from all the way up at the top of the stream, what we are or aren't doing at the front desk, all the way to the end in managing our aging accounts receivable and sending patient statements. But to give you maybe the top few that we're running into, I would say number one, attention to detail at the front desk or whoever is collecting that insurance and payer related information from the patients, not having that input into our system properly, not verifying the benefits correctly so we know how to bill and what to expect for that payer and how to collect from the patients or what to collect from the patients because we're unfamiliar with our insurance. The next step I would say relates specifically to our credentialing and enrollment, and is the provider and facility properly credentialed and enrolled with those payers so that they're set up and eligible for billing to access either the in or the out of network benefits that those patients have. That's a really long-standing problem. And keep in mind too that if you're enrolled with Blue Cross Blue Shield, that doesn't mean you're enrolled with all of the plans and products under Blue Cross Blue Shield. That means you're enrolled with what you were eligible for at that time of enrollment or what you selected as far as the different plans under that network. That applies to all of our commercial payers out there. So keeping our fingers on the pulse of our credentialing and enrollment, making sure that's properly done, properly maintained, and our claims are going out according to how we're enrolled is a big deal. Next, making sure we're submitting clean claims. So our procedure codes say this is what I'm doing with the patient. Our diagnosis codes say this is why this procedure was necessary. So it's the symptoms and conditions that support the necessity of those procedures. Now, our modifiers that we use on our procedure codes that we append to them for billing give that extra information. So you might imagine if you're reading a book, the more descriptive the terms are in the book, the more in your mind's eye you can see the characters, the setting, the scenery around you in the story that you're reading. That's what our modifiers do to our procedure codes. It provides additional information and additional detail that's not otherwise able to be communicated in the context of the coding. So if our procedure codes, diagnosis codes, and modifiers and our claims in general aren't set up properly, we're not in the best position to submit clean claims, to get paid properly for what we're doing, or to keep the money that we have been paid. Now, just a side note regarding that, one of the things I tell clinics all the time in every single session that I do on the phone and also in webinars and seminars is you have to have current resources in order to be able to have confidence in the coding systems that you have. The current resource that I used to use manuals all the time because I loved to write in them. Now I use findacode.com because it's online, it's accessible on my phone. I can demonstrate it from seminars and webinars. It has current information that is going to give me exactly today's information for every single procedure code. The other thing I'll quickly say on that is our software, while it's a useful tool to help us navigate our processes for billing and collections, it's not the best tool to help us determine the complete code descriptions. And so in order to have confidence in our coding, we need to know the complete code descriptions. Find a Code provides that for us, helps us be better documenters, helps us be better and more confident coders, helps us to generate and produce clean claims to get those submitted. Anyway, so I use the findacode.com to do that. Next, moving into the revenue cycle system and other challenges is making sure we're managing our rejections. We know how to read and review our EOBs so that we're posting those properly, taking the next steps for appeals, providing documentation, resubmissions, things like that when we need to. And then overall, aging accounts receivable, not just from our patients, but also from our insurances as well.
Great. I'm glad Find a Code's worked well for you. That's awesome.
Yep. It was an
Great.
interesting conversion because I loved the book so much because I'm one of the oldies that I liked to write in the books, but the Find a Code has been great because I take screenshots, it's accessible everywhere, and I have the complete current description of all the codes I'm using.
Yeah. I had a quote once from someone that was enrolled like you in the past, and they said that they actually saved them several hours a day using that tool versus not having it, and they made them that much more efficient. So that's awesome. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, tell me more about on the doctor side, what kind of pushback you get on them not wanting to document properly or because they're busy? And how do you get the doctors engaged with that whole documentation process, so where they really understand the collection process requires a good documented clean claim?
Yes, and so I tell the docs all the time that your documentation is ultimately the bedrock of everything related to what comes next as far as you getting paid or not getting paid. When docs call me, they consistently tell me all the time, Brandy, I just want to get paid properly for what I'm doing. And I completely agree with them. However, I would add to that, I also want them to be in the best position to combat denials and conduct appeals. And I also want them to be in the best position to keep the money that they have been paid. And in order to do that, you have to have sound and solid documentation. Fortunately, technology is more in our favor these days than what once was, and documentation can become much more streamlined. Really, the sum of it is it's unfortunate because the docs just want to be the doctors and take care of their patients. This administrative stuff related to the documentation, the coding and billing isn't something they really saw coming, and often isn't something that the schools spend a lot of time educating them on the necessity of. But the sum of it is your documentation is either going to be your saving grace, or it's going to open a big can of worms for you as a healthcare provider if your documentation isn't sound. And so making sure you have a good, solid foundation, no different than if you're building a house, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a solid foundation poured, because that's going to enable you to have a sound, solid structure built on top of that. That's what your documentation is to the rest of your revenue cycle system.
Awesome. Well, can you give us any tips for the doctors that, from an auditing perspective, for the doctor that really does do more than just basic stuff? They do more complicated things, maybe by the nature of their practice, but yet from the auditing side, it throws off some red flags where they go, oh, this doctor shouldn't be doing this many of a higher procedure. How do you help those doctors navigate the reality of what they're really doing, and help the insurance companies understand that they are within their scope of practice and they are doing it right?
Well, the first thing is make sure that you are confident in what your scope of practice is as a healthcare provider. Your state is going to document that and have that very clearly outlined for you. So make sure you're treating patients within that. The next thing that you need to make sure to do as a healthcare provider is get to know your payers. And so every single payer has a policy guideline. Regardless of your network status, you could be an out-of-network provider, but you're still responsible for adhering to the policy guidelines according to your specialty. So review your payers, Aetna, Blue Cross, Cigna, Medicare, and so on, and get to know what their expectations are as far as what's allowed to be billed, what is expected to be documented, what's considered medical necessity. They even have an outline in the payer policy guidelines that they list, and they call it experimental, investigational, and unproven procedures. That's even defined in many of the payer policy guidelines. So it's a really clear GPS, if you will, for healthcare providers to see what that specific payer's expectations are. Helps you be in a more confident position for coding, for billing, for collections, and for patient communications just by knowing your payers.
That's awesome. So tell me on the auditing side, what are some things you've seen? If you share with me one or two anecdotal stories of where the auditing broke down because they were doing things wrong, and some success stories of, by getting things fixed up, how it made things so much better for a practice.
Sure. Yeah. So compliance-wise, we're obligated as healthcare providers to, at a minimum of once per year, have either internally or outsource it, a documentation audit, meaning we're responsible for finding and fixing our own oversights and errors before the payers do. So step number one is doing that. As far as success story, actually, I would say first, challenges clinics have come into regarding audits that have come up. One of them is therapies, timed therapies, especially. If you're not familiar with the timed coding guidelines, there's an excellent chance you're charging for too many units of our timed therapies. The next one is our exams and our re-exam procedure codes. There's very specific criteria that we have to meet and have included in our documentation to establish and determine the level of the exam or re-exam that we're billing for. And so we can go on with multiple of other examples, but just to give those two as quick and common examples,
Okay.
clinics are often asked for records, or payers will deny. And when they deny for medical necessity or something along those lines, it really puts that back into the clinic's court to determine, is this appealable? What can we do? Or they're asking for recoupment, so they're asking for money back on the payer side. How do we combat that? Once again, going back to that sound documentation, translating it properly to code is going to help us. So some success stories are the clinics that have taken that proactive approach to get to know and familiarize themselves with their payers are in a better position to combat those types of audits. Providers or clinics that have reviewed the complete code descriptions of the codes they're using to have confidence that their documentation is being properly translated into code. Because keep in mind, same story, different language. That's all coding is. It's just the documentation translated into another language. And so some success stories would be those that have been able to show they've done their due diligence in having confidence not just in their documentation, but translating it over correctly into code. And with that being said, their success is either minimizing the impact of the audit, so having a lower amount recouped. Otherwise, in many circumstances, they're able to review those payer policies and show that they're in compliance with the payer policy guideline and often be able to keep the money that they have been paid. So it really depends upon all those upstream activities. Are you documenting thoroughly? Is your documentation being properly translated into code? Are you familiar with the payer and the payer expectations for the payers that you're submitting and expecting consideration for coverage and reimbursement? If so, you're in a good position to get paid properly for what you're doing, keep the money that you have been paid, and then certainly combat those recoupment requests and denials that when they do come, because it's not if, it's when, right?
Right. And how do you help the front desk or those office staff not stress out when they get those requests for audits and maintain? There's an emotional side of this too, where there's a stress level and you've got to manage that. Say, it's okay, we got this. This is just part of the process. What do you do to help them with that? Especially those first audits that come through that they've never seen before.
Yep, it's often, oh my goodness, what did we do wrong? How much
Right.
is this going to cost? The doc is going to be really upset. And so what I tell them is it's possible this could be a learning experience that could be costly to the clinic in some form. But it's also possible that this is going to be, in fact, very likely, this is going to be a learning experience altogether. And what we're able to do now is, because this audit has occurred, it happens to everyone. The revenue cycle system is imperfect. It's always been imperfect. It's always going to be imperfect. There are going to be audits. There are going to be recoupment requests. The very best we can do is our due diligence to make sure that we're in compliance with the rules that are in place for us. And so let's back into it and find where this and why this may have occurred. It could have been random, but it could be something in our billing patterns or our upstream clinic level practices or processes that's prompting it. So let's go through and do a diagnostic, if you will, and figure out where we might be able to find interferences that are perhaps prompting this. And usually with that, and I tell them, you know what, losing sleep over this isn't going to help anything. What we need to do is learn and understand so we can take that approach the next time and seeing around that corner when it comes, or knowing what next steps to take, rather than just sort of feeling like we've been hit with something that's scary and daunting, because it certainly can be.
Yeah. My dad's favorite quote I remember as a kid was, every day when you wake up, there's going to be speed bumps. It's all about your attitude, how you're going to go over them and deal with them. And I think that's great. Those are some great anxiety management tips when those audits do come, because they will. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose your job because the doctor's mad at you. Just know that these will happen. That's part of the whole RCM process, right? Well,
Absolutely. It's the nature of healthcare. So in my slides, I actually mentioned this to you the other day, and you just reminded me again. I always try to tell stories because coding and billing is not necessarily everyone's favorite topic like it is mine. And so I always tell them, it's been several years ago now, but my son, I have 14-year-old twins, and my son always comes to me even then and even still now and says, "Hey, Mom, did you know?" And he tells me all these facts because he reads and researches everything all the time. And so he was telling me one day that the eagle has a great advantage over other birds. And one of the many advantages is that it, rather than having to hide and hunker down from the storm and just wait till it hits you and wait till it passes, the eagle rises above the storm so it can see the danger, the interference, the challenges, and it navigates over and through the storm. So not only does it get through it faster, but it's able to see the dangers that it's encountering to be able to approach them differently to minimize the impact of them. So it has a more keen eyesight in order to be able to do that, and multiple of other things. But the sum of it was that in the revenue cycle system, really, we have the ability to take that approach like the eagle. We know there's going to be storms. We know it's imperfect. Rather than waiting for the storm to hit us and then just sort of trying to figure out where to go from there, we have the ability to learn to look at our revenue cycle system from the beginning to the end a little bit differently, like from the perspective of that eagle, so we can see disturbances and dangers that are up and coming. We can know which direction to take and what steps to take in order to navigate through those things, not if they happen, but when they happen, so that we can arrive to the other side of it more quickly and, really with less damage, if you will, overall, because we've have that perspective and that stamina and that strength and that knowledge to be able to navigate it differently. And I love that because it really does help clinics know that, okay, something's going to happen. We can see this, but because we're familiar with all the moving parts of our revenue cycle system, we're going to be able to navigate and address this more quickly, which means still getting paid faster, dealing with denials, rejections, and other problems when they do happen faster than what we normally would, preserving our patient relationships, because not just a direct but often indirect impact to everything that happens in our revenue cycle system is going to have an impact on the patients. Because if you think about it, who else gets a copy of every EOB besides your office? The patient does. They can see, oh, prior authorization was required but not obtained. They can see this is denied for medical necessity. They can see records requested and not provided. They can see all of those different types of things. And so if we know what to look for, understand our revenue cycle system, we can address those things much faster rather than just having to find a way to absorb the impact, which is costly in a lot of different ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Hey, just so for all the RCM type folks out there, if you're a coder, biller, or auditor, walk into the office, hold your head high, follow Brandy's advice, and just say, "I'm the eagle." Be the eagle, and know that stuff's going to happen, but survey it from above and have confidence and not fear.
Absolutely.
Great advice, Brandy. Thank you so much. So part of that process too, you mentioned earlier, credentialing and how that's kind of an important piece and missing piece. And that's kind of where recently you've really put a lot of focus. Tell me about Rapid Credentialing. That's where you're the president of now. And with all the people you've got working for you, what you're tackling and where you see the breakdowns are in not being credentialed properly.
Yeah, so credentialing and enrollment is part of the foundation of the revenue cycle process. And so if that part is skipped or if that part is uncertain for the providers and for the clinics, then everything to follow that regarding the insurance claims preparation, billing, collections, patient communications and patient collections, insurance verifications, and so on is going to be unknown. No one likes to shoot in the dark, and no one likes to have that to be, walking blindly through the fog. And so just to quickly even explain what that is, credentialing and enrollment is first, the credentialing part is the screening part, and that's where payers are reviewing the provider data to make sure the provider is properly licensed, properly located where they say they are, that there's not issues with provider identity theft and things along those lines. So it's making sure essentially that facility and that provider is legitimate. Then we go into the enrollment process, which is where the provider is going to do one of two things. One is register, perhaps as an out-of-network provider if they want to access the out-of-network benefits or non-participating with Medicare, or otherwise they're going to contract, which is to be participating with Medicare is how they would term it, but otherwise you'd be contracted as an in-network facility and in-network provider. The challenges that clinics have with that, first and foremost, is not really knowing if and how they're credentialed and enrolled, or which plans under which networks they are credentialed and enrolled with. As you might imagine, you could be seeing a Medicare Advantage patient, for example, and not be enrolled with that Medicare Advantage plan unbeknownst to you as the provider or the clinic. That means you're not billing properly, you're not communicating and collecting from your patient properly, perhaps not verifying benefits properly, and so on. And that becomes an issue with perhaps claims rejections, claims not processing if they do process the way you would expect, perhaps miscommunication and miscollection from your patients, and down the line. And so rapid credentialing is part of that foundation of the revenue cycle system in which we do discovery to determine how providers are enrolled and if they're enrolled with which plans and products so that they know, their front desk knows, and their billing team knows. We complete the credentialing and enrollment for them end to end to make sure that they are properly contracted and enrolled as they would be expected. We add different, we call it lines of business. And so that's different plans and products under commercial networks for them. So they're enrolled with the plans they want to and need to be enrolled with. And then we also address their changes in their office. Sometimes we add new locations, we add new providers, we move from one facility to another. Those credentialing changes also means you have to make updates and corrections to your contracts so that you're eligible to continue to bill using those contracts properly through your software and getting paid correctly. And so rapid credentialing addresses all of that in a nutshell for those clinics to make sure that they are, again, properly set up for clean billing. We work with clinics, with billing services, and even software in many cases to just make sure that that part of the foundation of the revenue cycle process is properly intact.
Wow, finding code is a great tool for the coding and billing work, but you really brought out the point that if you're not set up and with your credentialing right, then you're having all these problems that may not be related to coding and billing. It's go upstream, get that core stuff solved first before you try to solve the next tier of challenges. That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. With the clinics you work with, how many of them deal with HCC type issues with HCC coding at all? Have you had any, is that come into play much at all or not?
A little bit, not too often. More often than not, we run into clinics that are submitting for charges that are ultimately being denied or having recoupment requests. And then when we go back to look at the codes they're billing, what's included in the documentation isn't the same. And so their documentation and claim forms aren't telling the same story as their coding. And so then they're ultimately not in the best position to get paid properly. So on our end, we do, in addition to, just the credentialing and enrollment, we address a lot of billing related problems where the documentation and claim forms or documentation and coding aren't telling the same story, or diagnosis aren't in proper order, the modifiers aren't being properly applied, things like that are impacting their cash flow and collections right now on those claims.
Tell me, Brandy, in your mind over the next 2 to 10 years, where in healthcare, where there's current friction points that you're working with every day, where do you see improvements there that need to be made? And are there areas you think AI could even take a place to make a difference there from your experience?
AI is being implemented in multiple different places right now, not just in healthcare software to help providers document and to help them select codes correctly. That's definitely valuable. I would say that my 10-year vision for it is that has become very streamlined and makes it even more efficient for providers to document and code and have confidence in the translation from documentation to code. AI also has a place in claims processing and the next steps, I would say, for when claims aren't processed correctly in helping clinics better understand what that next step needs to be for those charges or those claims that are denied. AI is coming along in helping clinics to be more efficient with that. And over the span of the next 10 years, we'll absolutely have a role in that. I'm personally involved in some things related to that, and it's going to be super cool. It helps them to be more efficient and just more knowledgeable in general. Otherwise, on the AI front, I would say working with our payers. And so verifying benefits, getting prior authorization, those things right now that clinics don't like to do because it's time consuming. I think AI over the next 10 years is going to have a place in that as well to make that more efficient for the clinics overall too.
Great. Brandy, thanks so much for your time today. It's been great having you on our podcast. Just if people want to get a hold of you, can you give me your website name again, whatever content information you would like to share with our listeners?
Absolutely. So you can find me at Rapid Credentialing. The website is rapidcredentialing.com, and you can email me directly, and it's Brandy with a Y at rapidcredentialing.com. You can also email us at support@rapidcredentialing.com, and that will certainly get to me as well. But to email me direct, Brandy at rapidcredentialing.com. More than happy to help with coding questions, credentialing, revenue cycle questions, and things like that. If it's not something that I can do in my office, I have certainly a broad network of experts across the industries that would be happy to help, and I could certainly save clinics some time in having to do their own investigation. So reach out to me, happy to help, and we can go from there.
Great. Thanks again, Brandy. As always, it was a great chance to talk with you today, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Likewise to you.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. Head to fountainofvitality.com for more episodes, insights, and resources. Remember, your health is yours to own. Take charge, focus on what you can control, and keep exploring what works for you. Always be your best self, lift others, and trust the compass of wisdom. Until next time, stay vibrant and take care.